My name is Kory Draughn. I'm the Chief Technologist for the iRODS Consortium. And I'm going to be giving this technology update. All right. So before we get into anything related to 4.3 or whatnot, we're going to have Alan come up and say a few words about 4.2 and what's going on there.
Hi, I'm Alan. I'm one of the developers for iRODS. I guess I'm supposed to talk about 4.2.12, which is the most recent release of iRODS, not the newest necessarily, but the most recent. 4.2.12 will be the final release of the 4.2 series. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you that. It was limited to security fixes, bug fixes, and trivial enhancements. Here's a very high-level overview of what's been going on with that. I guess they told me to talk about it because my name's at the top. I don't know. But there were 160 issues closed. Thank you to all of our contributors for this release. We worked very hard on it, so I hope it works well for everybody. Here are some of the highlights from 4.2.12. We're going to mostly focus on this top one because it's the most interesting. We provided a way to look at JSON objects through the native rule language. So that's going to be interesting because most of our new APIs are using JSON inputs and outputs, and you want to be able to look at those and crack them open and manipulate them in your rules. So if you're using the native rule language, this is just a way to do that. We also made the admin keyword more widely available across our various APIs and libraries. You can see, I think that's all of the ones that we were able to identify there. We improved user group and password management. This is just overall improvements to how you manage your users and groups. You can't downgrade your own service account admin anymore, so that's good. We also spent a long time making fixes and expansive tests for the compound resource. A lot of that work had to do with using S3 as an archive. So look forward to fixes in that as you upgrade. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Alan. So we put out 4.2.12, and some of you may be wondering what's going on with 4.3.1. So I think 4.3.0 was released about a year ago, maybe even more. 4.3.1 is still in development. There's some things that we need to take care of, and we need to add the polish before we can release it. And so we appreciate your patience. But one thing that we are going to do on this talk is we're going to talk about the features and things that are coming and will be available once 4.3.1 is released. So first up is the user experience updates. These are not only for people who are not administrators. This is not just for normal users. These are also for administrators. First up is that we adjusted the setup logic by removing all references to rsyslog and log rotate. So when you install 4.3.1, it will not configure these applications for you. Instead, we've moved those steps into documentation. The reason behind this is because there are multiple implementations for syslog, and so we leave that decision upon which implementation to use up to the administrator. Another thing we did for 4.3.1 is that we have modified the log message output structure we've removed the log facility property because this didn't serve a major purpose, and we've replaced it with server zone so that people can actually see where a message was produced from. We've also modified AC Pre-Connect so that now you get access to client connection information so that you can make decisions about what to do based on who's connecting, et cetera. Another thing we did here is with the iChmod command, and that there used to be a way, if you remove your permissions, if you're the owner of that object, if you are the person who originally created it, you could restore your permissions using the secret owner field in the database. And so we removed this capability, and now iChmod follows and honors the permission model, just like all the other iCommands. Last but not least, the Unix file system resource plugin now has grown support for detached mode, just like the S3 resource plugin. Audio issue. Okay. So detached mode is mostly good for if you have storage in different locations and you want to, it's basically remote from the actual resource. And so you can specify where this data is, and the Unix file system will reach out. You can basically configure multiple Unix file system resources to be able to access that remote location without the data actually being local to it. This better? Is this better? This is better? Lower. This is better? This one is better. Okay, so I guess I'm just gonna have to speak like this, which is very weird, but we'll make it happen. Okay, so core server enhancements. Here we have a list of things that we've done to the actual server's core. The items in bold are the things that we're going to cover in this talk. But just to go through on a high level what these are, I guess the items that aren't bold. So we've added new C++ libraries for administering zones as well as tickets. And so these libraries will enable us to quickly be able to adjust and manipulate zones and ticket information in new clients. We've also introduced a compile time feature test macro facility, which allows people who are writing C and C++ code to be able to detect what an iRODS server or deployment provides. And so we imagine that we're going to continue to expand on these as we move into the future and enhance things. So now we're going to get into the actual items that are in bold. First one being the address sanitizer. This is a very fast memory error detector for C and C++. This is something that we've used in 4.3.1, which allowed us to detect memory issues that were reported in 4.3.0. And so we've resolved several memory leaks, use after free bugs, heap buffer overflows, these types of things. Using this tool, we're going to continue to use this moving forward to make the server more stable. And the way you enable this capability is through the CMake. If you're compiling iRODS code and you want to check memory errors, ODR violations, then you set the iRODS enable address sanitizer option to yes. This is not an option that you should be running in production, because if it does run into issues, the server will terminate immediately, and that is by design. Next is a very interesting new API plugin. This came out of work on the HTTP API redesign. And so it's called RC Switch User. This is essentially a performance-based API plugin, in that people who want to have long-running connections and reuse those connections by changing the identity associated with that connection, they can do this by using RC Switch User. This is primarily focused or aimed at applications such as NFS RISE, or any application that is trying to serve several users across maybe a connection pool. And the way we get performance with this is it avoids the setup and teardown of TCP connections. And like I said, it allows you to reuse existing connections, so you get a major performance boost. This also brings us closer to true connection pooling. So we did some performance tests, some simple tests to verify performance. So we wrote two applications. The first one essentially just connects to an iRODS server just n number of times with the same client identity. So we connect, disconnect. We just continuously do this in a loop. The second application makes one connection, and then it calls RC Switch User with different identities the same number of times. And what we notice is that there was a 98% performance improvement with this scheme. So we'll imagine as we continue to flesh this out and provide more facilities in this way, people will start moving towards applications that want to maintain existing connections rather than just connect and disconnect. All right, so another interesting thing that we've been looking at is providing project templates. Right now, at this time, we only provide project templates for C++. The idea behind these is that people who are writing C and C++, they now have a way to just essentially avoid having to do all these setup necessary, like to get up and going to write software. So if you want to write a client, a microservice, or a rule engine plugin, just go use the template. It already is set up for you to just start writing code and get your idea out. This is also really good for prototyping with C++. At the moment, we don't have a resource plugin template, but that is something that we're going to put together and make available to people who are interested in that type of thing. Another thing that we are focusing on is improving documentation. This is very important. It's been, people who have used iRODS always ask questions that, we hear these questions, the same questions many times. And so we want to capture all this information in good documentation. And one way we can do that is by producing a policy cookbook. This is essentially, the idea behind this is that we want to provide an online resource that's dedicated to providing, best practice and latest techniques around various policy-based situations in the iRODS ecosystem. At the moment, the 5 items here are the things that we cover in this policy cookbook, but hopefully as over time, we would like to see more people contribute to this, because I imagine people in the community have developed their own solutions and ways to solve problems. And so we really would like feedback on this so this can grow and people will have a place that they can go to see how to do things in a very good way. We're also improving documentation for data objects. This is essentially we're expanding information around how these things work. And so this means we're including information in 431 about intermediate replicas, locks, logical locking, high-level operations about explaining get and put and move and how you should think about these things. We also have provided documentation around our data main and provided explanations for all the columns there so that people who aren't familiar with these things can quickly get up to speed on them. And the idea is that we're going to continue to expand this as well over time. All right, so we have 2 lists here. On the left, we have topics which will be covered later in the conference. Everything from S3 to HTTP to CLI. And on the right, we have, we're going to have topics covered by members of the development team. I'm going to have them come up and say some words about what they've been working on leading up to 431. So first, we're going to have Justin James come up and tell us about S3 and Lobus connector.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, basically for S3, we certified a few new vendors this year. Fujifilm, which I believe actually happened last year, but I wanted to mention them. Oracle Cloud and Wasabi S3 were all certified to work with iRODS. There's been a few bug fixes. So there were changes around how we stream a file from cache. So sometimes S3, even though we're in streaming mode, we still have to use a cache file. So we reorganized the code. So when we stream from cache, before you specified a number of threads to stream from the cache file, and each thread handled a single part. there are 10 threads by default, and the maximum size per thread or for part is 5 gigabytes. So that actually limited us to a 50 gigabyte file as far if we were having to stream it from a cache file. So we reorganized the code so that each thread can handle multiple parts, and that fixed the 50 gigabyte limit if you're streaming from cache. It also reduced the chance of having the 2-minute timeout. Everything for a part has to be streamed within 2 minutes, according to Amazon. And so by using smaller part sizes, we reduce the chances of getting a timeout there. And also, if we do get a timeout, we can recover from it more seamlessly because we're not streaming such large parts. There was a kind of a serious bug we found in that if we turned on detached mode, the catalog consumer thought it was a provider. So we fixed that. And we talked about that this week as also. And there was another issue that files between 4 megabytes and 32 megabytes when you were replicating to an S3 resource. So this is an initial put, but a replication. iRODS was actually using multiple threads to write data, and that's not what the S3 resource expected. Because of that, it wasn't working. So this is only replication, but we fixed that so that we can handle the number of threads that iRODS were using. Normally, we wouldn't have expected that because of the file size is under 32 megabytes, but anyway, that's been fixed. So those are the S3 bug fixes. For Globus, we fixed a couple of issues. One issue was the update time was not being updated properly. And that was because the S3 connector spawns a bunch of threads to write to iRODS, but the main thread that spawns threads wasn't actually writing data. And because of that, iRODS was not updating the update time. So we just reorganized that so that when you spawn, instead of spawning in threads, we spawn in -1 threads, and the main thread, the parent thread, also writes data, and that fixed the update time problem. The other problem was the base 64 encode and decode methods in iRODS are not namespaced, and you can run into conflicts on systems. So we moved those from the iRODS namespace into the Globus connector, use proper namespacing for that, and fix any kind of conflicts we had there. This change is also being rolled into iRODS so that those methods within iRODS will be properly namespaced as well.
Thank you, Justin. Now we're going to have Dan come up and tell us about what he's been working on.
That is the Python iRODS client. It is a pure Python client library, allowing the query and access to, as well as manipulation and administration of objects in the iRODS catalog, which is, of course, everything from data objects and resource hierarchies and users and groups. So it's natural that this is leveraged. It's quite popular and leveraged by a number of applications from across the iRODS consortium, and also natural there are many contributions from across that community. Although, of course, we at the iRODS core software team are the the maintainers of this library. So we've had, as you can see, well, 1.1.4 was the version around this time last year, UGM last year, and we've had 4 major or 4 releases since then, up to 1.18. Up to 1.18 now. So we'll go over the highlights of that. It was actually a a connection timeout setting on session objects, which had broken recently or at some point, and that was fixed. It's basically a way to handle a situation over connections where you have, say, a long operation in the iRODS server, and there are no bits or bytes flying back and forth on the socket, right? So also there is a new interface to handle permissions. It's called ACLs instead of permissions, and the old permissions interface will be likely within a few more releases will be deprecated. We can now easily take care of the problem of a few extra slashes or appended slashes in a logical path in iRODS. We can leverage already existing SSL connections in your iRODS client environment quite easily. So those contexts are internally generated to the client library. We can also allow group admins, which are a level between RODS admin and RODS users. In other words, between normal users and full admin, to, for instance, create groups and add and remove users from those groups. Also, we provide access to properties of a resource, a coordinating or a storage resource, and that is now valid from 4.1 through 4.3. There were a few differences there to iron out. Minor improvements include that there were, I think there was password problems that we ironed out in Windows, so we can log in from a Windows platform. We can now unregister individual data replicas, and we can prevent the modify password method, which is what every user can use to modify their own password, from corrupting that password in the database, which was a problem until recently, apparently. We now handle session auto closes better in the SSL case, and we've added a not like for the jQuery capability in the server. Upcoming releases will include the ability to go directly to the resource server when doing a data object open or a put or a get. That includes parallel access to and from the object, parallel transfer of data, upload and download, and also the ability to opt in to closing down, flushing and closing down data objects, and that's not enabled by default. It's an option that is there. Also, the ability to communicate to authenticate through the new authentication framework in iRODS 4.3. If anyone's curious, there's no link here, but you can find out more about the Python iRODS client through the client's link at the bottom of the iRODS.org webpage.
Thank you, Dan. Next up, we're going to have Marcus come up and talk about what he's worked on. All right.
Howdy, I'm Marcus. I'm the build engineer for the iRODS project. Okay. So I've been working on the few things, AMQP audit plugin. Can you hear me? Louder? Okay. So I've been working on a few things, the AMQP audit plugin, the Python rule engine plugin, and the build and packaging. So let's talk about AMQP. There have been some modernization and housekeeping efforts on the plugin itself. We've refactored it to use Inline JSON instead of JSON, and to use Cupid Proton's new C++ API. A few other modernization efforts as well. As for housekeeping, we've fixed the problem with the RPM packages. We've reorganized the repository, and we removed a no longer used configuration option, and a few other miscellaneous things. And we're also having a better formed AMQP messages, better formed JSON. We have removed the wrapper tokens that are no longer needed, and we have better handling of the default configuration if you do not specify particular options in the configuration file. Now, as for the ELK stack that is used for demonstration purposes with the AMQP rule engine plugin, it's also undergone some modernization and housekeeping. We're using the new Docker file syntax, which allows us to reduce the image size the build time for the image, and the number of intermediate images for the container. We've updated the entire software stack. So we've updated the OS for the container base image. We updated Elasticsearch, Kibana, RabbitMQ, and the JDK. Let's see, we're also excluding a number of unneeded files from the container image, like the extra JDK that comes with Kibana. We also have updated it to for the new version of the plugin, and we have some toggleable workarounds if you wanted to use it with the plugin as it is currently released or older versions. And we've also replaced Logstash with a Python daemon, as Logstash doesn't actually speak the correct version of AMQP that we want. We've also moved a lot of the setup to the container build time and the initial startup so that you don't have to go in and configure Kibana manually and that kind of thing. And we have an argument for specifying the Java heap size for Kibana so it doesn't run out of RAM. So for the Python rule engine plugin, we've also reorganized that repository. We had a problem where it would take forever to build and it would use a lot of RAM when doing so. That's also been fixed. So if you have a parallelized build, the build time is reduced by an order of magnitude. We've also fixed some package dependency declarations, so you're not pulling in unneeded development packages for a version of Python that doesn't even matter, and some miscellaneous housekeeping. So as for the build and packaging, this is my main focus most of the time. We still don't have a timetable for when we're going to move to a more normal and boring process for packaging, but we continue to move in that direction. Clang Tidy has brought us closer to building against libstandard C++, and we've started work on unprivileged building and packaging inside the development environment. And as we continue to work on this, it's going to start changing things out from under the developers. So in order to smooth the transition, we're going to be using some CMake presets.
Thank you, Marcus. So just like last year, we have some additional help through the use of interns. People have already pointed them out before, but they are working on some very interesting things and helping us improve the ecosystem around iRODS as well. For one, we're looking at the automated ingest client. We want to add put sync support from S3 to that. We also want to enhance the zone management tool by adding additional features, such as additional new health checks, support for the delay server, tickets, etc. We are updating the zone report JSON schema as well as the output so that this better expresses the better express the design and it matches what's there in iRODS 4.3.1 better. And so that's coming along really well. Our final project is that we also want to finally document the XML protocol for iRODS, because anytime anyone wants to use a different programming language that is not supported today, they always have to go reference either Go or Python or some other implementation. And that is not the type of thing people want to always have to do before they can use their favorite language. And so we want to work on improving that situation for people by providing a special specification that is consumable for developers. With all that said, big picture is, we recently put out the roadmap. And so our goal now is to, we want to satisfy those goals, right? And that includes things such as making iRODS more cloud friendly. We want to replace Packstruct. We just want to, we want to present iRODS in a way that it's easy for people to approach. That is the overall goal of iRODS at this point, as far as the development team. We also want to focus on, as always, improving clients. That's GUIs, file system integration, APIs, etc. We're going to continue to build out capabilities and plugins and other components that can help administrators do their work, as well as users be able to focus on the science and stuff they're trying to do. And we, as always, we want to push policy and configuration rather than having people write things, come up with their own solutions as far as writing code all the time. So if you, we'd love to hear from you, your use cases, pain points, things that you would like to see iRODS provide. So please come talk to us. You can do that by getting involved, by joining the community. You can do that through by participating in working groups, creating issues in GitHub, pull requests, just reaching out to the team through Google Chat. And yeah, we'd love to have people. We want to grow the community, and we would like for people to continue to tell people about iRODS and talk about it and put it in people's ear. So with that, thank you. All right, are there any questions about any of this that we just spoke about? All right, so we got some questions in the back.
I was wondering the PCR's connection timeout. I was wondering how it would manifest itself. Just curious. The one that you fixed. Yeah.
Yeah, especially during a long checksum operation, you would see, like at the end of that, the next time you try to do anything on a connection, you would see a network timeout error coming from that socket. It would bubble up through the Python, of course, to the user.
Kory, you mentioned the new API, the RC switch user. And I was wondering, with the Python client, you have the feature to switch to another user. So does the Python client gonna start using that new API or not?
So this is just like any other API plugin. It will be available to all languages. The only thing that, but it does require that the clients implement the other side of the feature, right? So when you RC switch user requires updates within the server and the client side. And what we mean by that is that it's manipulating state in the actual connection information to say you're now Alice rather than Bob. And if all of that succeeds within the server, that means that the client now has to also be updated to reflect that, hey, I'm also Alice, so that things stay in line, so they stay in sync, right? So, and it's a small change, but you know, we'll provide documentation and things around how to do this, and with any of the clients, we'll have that, and we'll have those features fully supported by the time this becomes available.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Oh, we got one.
I was curious about the XML API, and it sounds like you guys are sort of sticking with that. I wonder, there was talk years ago about protobuf or doing something to have a more formal definition of the client interface. And what's your feeling on that? Or
So the idea behind documenting the XML API is that this is going to act as a reference for building the actual high performance things, such as the API, the new interface, because we want to replace and get away from the XML protocol entirely. And so there's things that are like flat buffers, protocol buffers. And so if we understand the XML protocol, then that means that we can see where the pros and cons are and develop a better one that everybody can just, hey, ask protocol buffers, generate me the specification for Java or Python, and all of them behave the same, right? So it's purely about reference, providing a reference document for people, just like any old RFC. Oh, got a question?
the list of newly certified S3 vendors was mentioned today. Is there a full list of certified S3 vendors available somewhere I can look at?
See. Oh, it's on the README. Questions?
Yeah, I don't know if we have a list. We could probably come up with one. Obviously Amazon has been certified and MinIO has been certified as well. I'm sure I'm missing one or two, but I could probably come up with a list.
It's on the read too. Yeah, it's on the read.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure if the README's been updated with the ones I mentioned today, so I'll check that as well.
He said it has. It has. All right. Any additional questions? So if there are no more questions, then I guess we now get a really large break.